There's a generation that survived everything and learned nothing should be trusted to last. Not jobs, not marriages, not governments, not the particular version of the future they were promised when they were young. They watched entire systems collapse in real time. Economies, ideologies, the social contracts their parents had staked their lives on. And they did what people do when the ground keeps shifting. They stopped expecting the ground to hold and started carrying everything themselves. They became their own infrastructure. And somewhere in that process of becoming self-sufficient, something else happened. Something quieter and more permanent. They forgot, or maybe were never allowed, to put the weight down. This is the psychology of the generation that survived by working. The ones who are 45 to 60 years old now, who grew up in the wreckage of the 1970s and came of age in the brittle optimism of the 1980s, who entered the workforce just in time to watch it restructure beneath their feet. Generation X, the ones history kept skipping over. And here's what nobody tells you about people who learn to survive through relentless self-reliance. The survival strategy doesn't retire when the crisis ends. It becomes the personality. For this person, rest is not neutral. Rest is suspect. There's a low-grade internal alarm that activates somewhere around the second hour of doing nothing, a hum of anxiety, a creeping conviction that they are falling behind something, wasting something, failing something they cannot quite name. They don't call it guilt, necessarily. It doesn't feel dramatic enough for that word. It feels more like an itch. Like sitting in a room where something has been left undone and the walls know it. Like sitting in perfect silence while something inside keeps insisting that right now, in this very moment, while they're just breathing, something irreplaceable is slipping away. Productivity isn't just a habit for them. It's proof of something. Evidence they're still here, still contributing, still justified in the space they take up. Psychologists call this identity work fusion, a condition where a person's sense of self becomes so thoroughly entangled with their output that rest doesn't feel like recovery. It feels like erasure. Research published in the Journal of Vocational Behavior has documented this pattern with particular prevalence in cohorts who experience significant economic instability during their formative years. When the environment around you is unstable, when resources feel contingent and security feels conditional, the brain builds a simple operating equation. Production equals safety. Stillness equals risk. And here's the thing. The brain of this generation got stuck in siege mode. For them, relaxing means lowering the shield. And the world, as they remember it, was always waiting for exactly that moment. The nervous system, once calibrated to that equation, does not easily recalibrate just because the circumstances changed. Here's where it gets genuinely fascinating. The Gen X survival instinct didn't form in a vacuum. A study published in the American Journal of Orthopsychiatry found that by 1984, roughly 7 million children between the ages of 5 and 13 were regularly unsupervised after school. Latchkey kids, they were called, as if it were charming, as if a key worn around a child's neck were a symbol of independence rather than a symbol of being on your own. These were children who learned to manage households, manage siblings, manage their own fear in empty apartments before they were old enough to drive. They became competent in conditions that had no business requiring that kind of competence from them. And competence once forged under pressure, doesn't know how to be anything else. It just keeps performing. Not because they enjoy the grind, because the grind is the only place that feels solid. They are, in many ways, the most pragmatic generation alive. They didn't grow up on social media affirmation. They didn't have a language for mental health. And even if they did, the culture around them had very little patience for it. Therapist was a word their parents used skeptically. If at all, you handled things. You showed up. You didn't burden people with the interior weather. Research in the Journal of Adult Development shows that Gen Xers report significantly lower rates of seeking social support during stress compared to both boomers and millennials. Not because they're less stressed, because somewhere in the wiring, asking for help got coded as weakness, and weakness got coded as danger. And the irony is almost painful. The very trait that kept them functional, the self-sufficiency, the stoicism, the capacity to absorb enormous amounts of difficulty without visibly breaking, is the same trait that now keeps them isolated. They became so good at not needing anyone that people stopped offering. And honestly, that's something we all do. When someone looks like they have everything under control, we simply stop asking if they need help. We take them at their word. We move on, and they are left in the vacuum of their own competence, in the particular loneliness of people who were never allowed to be a burden and now don't know how to become one, even when they're desperate for it. But here's what nobody tells you about the people who survived by working. Their relationship with exhaustion isn't simple. There's a complicated pride in it. Not arrogance, but something more like proof of life. Every finished task, every problem solved, everything handled is a small confirmation that they are still capable, still relevant, still earning their place in a world that taught them early that nothing is guaranteed. Psychologist Richard Tedeschi's research on post-traumatic growth suggests that roughly half to two-thirds of people who endure prolonged stress and instability develop a particular kind of earned wisdom, a clarity about what matters, a low tolerance for pretense, a dark humor that functions as both armor and connection. They become, over time, the people you want beside you when things fall apart. Not because they're unafraid, because they stopped expecting things not to fall apart decades ago and made their peace with the rubble. Tough but tender, exhausted but still showing up, guarded but quietly generous. They've carried things for so long that they've forgotten what it would feel like to set them down. Their survival became competence. Their competence became identity. Their identity became a cage they built themselves. And it's the most secure cage in the world, because the bars were welded from their own achievements. The problem is they don't know who they'd be if they simply walked out without the weight. So they stay inside it, adding more bars, calling it purpose, calling it discipline, calling it just who they are. And somehow, they're still here, still working, still holding it together, still quietly hoping someone will eventually notice how tired they are without them having to say so. If this video helped you identify the mechanisms of your own exhaustion, consider subscribing. We explore the quiet, unspoken parts of human psychology here. The parts that don't get talked about nearly enough because they're too busy pretending to be under control, and we're just getting started. Leave a comment with the word cage if you've felt those bars yourself.